country. Okay, my friends, I gotta say, truly, Liberation Day is here for us here in the United States. For the rest of the world, not so much. But for us, clearly, yesterday, a monumental day, and I'm choosing my words now very, very carefully. The unrolling of Trump's tariff regime yesterday at 4:00 in the afternoon at a major ceremony in the Rose Garden is one of the most, if not the most, economically consequential moment in Trump's second term. It is going to define the rest of his presidency and most likely his, at least in terms of the economy, his legacy. And let me just be very brutally honest with all of you. I am not a globalist. I am a nationalist. I have never been a free trader. I am an economic patriot. Since the early 1990s, I have been against free trade. I have always been for tariffs. Tariffs have worked. They've worked in America. I'm going to get to this a little bit later on in the show. People have no idea that high tariffs, in fact, helped to make America the greatest industrial manufacturing economic power in the world, literally from our very inception. But starting with NAFTA and then continuing with the World Trade Organization and then preferential trade treatment to China over the last 30 years, beginning with Bill Clinton, then George W. Bush, then Barack Obama, and then really the final nail in our coffin was under Joe Biden. We have now seen the great economic betrayal of our country, of our workers, of our entire middle working class. Literally, in the last 30 years, 5 to 7 million good-paying American jobs were outsourced to other countries. 60,000 factories gone, outsourced to China, to Mexico, to Vietnam, to Taiwan, to Brazil, to countries all over the world in which multinational corporations literally sent out our manufacturing, our industrial base, hollowing out much of middle America. We gave away our entire manufacturing industrial base over the last 30 years. And without a strong manufacturing industrial base, we will never be an economic superpower. And more importantly, we cannot be a military superpower. Without strong manufacturing, how can you build tanks? How can you build missiles? How can you build fleets of naval ships, military ships, fighter jets, drones, everything that is now needed to win a modern day war? And that's what President Trump understands. And so for the last 30 years, we have literally hollowed out our country. We have deindustrialized our country. And we have given away our manufacturing sector and our manufacturing base. And with it, our wealth. Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars we have outsourced, given away to China, the biggest winner, to the European Union, to other countries like South Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan. You can go on and on. Canada. They have been ripping us off. And let me just say this, because this needs to be said. The biggest lie that has been perpetrated against Trump regarding his trade policy over the last 2 months, and you've now seen it on overdrive, frankly, on Fox Business, on CNBC, on Bloomberg, on This is CNN, or MSNBC, or in the Wall Street Journal or in the New York Times or in the Boston Globe or in the Washington Post, it doesn't matter, across the entire legacy fake news media, is that Trump is waging a tariff war against supposedly our friends and allies. He's mistreating Canada, according to them. He's mistreating Mexico. He's mistreating the Europeans. He's mistreating China. He's mistreating Taiwan. He's mistreating Australia. How can he do this? Trump is waging an economic tariff war against the world. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. As Trump laid out beautifully, clearly, simply yesterday, for 30 years, the world has been waging an economic tariff war against us. While we had low tariffs, let's take Canada. Canada imposed, I'm not talking about retaliatory tariffs now against Trump. I'm talking for the last 30 years before Trump even became president this time around. 279% tariff on milk. 250% tariff on cheese. 70% tariff on aluminum. 25% tariff on all American cars going into Canada. I'm not picking on Canada. The bigger abuser, the more predatory trading nation, in fact, as Trump rightly pointed out, was Communist China. They're the ones who really took us to the bank. 69% tariff on American goods over the last 30 years. 69%. Plus, they manipulate their currency to make their goods even cheaper. Plus, they illegally and unfairly subsidize many of their industries to make their goods even cheaper so they can dump them on the American market. China has been ripping us off trillions of dollars. The Europeans, a 39% tariff over the last 30 years. They've been ripping us off. The Mexicans ripping us off. The Canadians ripping us off. The days of them ripping us off are over. You talk about friends and allies? Since when do friends and allies rip a friend off the way they've been ripping us off? Using us, abusing us, manipulating us. And our stupid leaders, and Trump is right, whether it's Bubba, whether it was W, whether it was the Dare Litter, or whether it was Marbles Biden, Dementia Joe, they just gave away the store. Come on in, baby, and loot. Come on in and pillage and plunder. Take what you want. And our jobs went overseas. Our manufacturing went overseas. We had record trade deficits for 30 years. Our wealth went everywhere except here. They bled us white. No more. All Trump is doing is rebalancing an unfair trade relationship. It's time for fair trade, not free trade. It's time to bring manufacturing back. It's time to bring industry, the reindustrialization of America, back. And it's time to bring good-paying blue-collar jobs that we used to have in this country for decades and decades. Jobs that were so critical in places like Michigan and Wisconsin and Ohio and all across the heartland, where you can raise a family, pay your mortgage, send your child off to college, make a good living. We're going to bring good paying jobs by the millions back to the United States. And as I said on X last night, and I want to repeat it now, Trump's announcement of all of these new tariffs is, to me, clearly a watershed moment now in Trump's presidency. He has thrown down the gauntlet because what he is now saying is fair trade, not free trade. And that the days of us selling our country out to China, to the Europeans, to the Canadians, to the Mexicans, to the globalists are over. He is going to restore America's economic independence, our economic ability to manufacture and make products and services here in America. And above all, he is going to restore America's economic wealth and turn us again into an economic superpower. The era of globalism is over. Agree, disagree, all of your calls next. 620 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, President Trump now, knowing full well what the stakes are, this for him, he's crossed the Rubicon. He's now declared war on the globalists. That's what these tariffs mean. He is now taking on very powerful multinational companies, foreign governments, other countries who have been used to ripping us off, taking advantage of us. They don't want the gravy train to stop. They want to continue to take advantage of us, frankly, to keep ripping us off, stealing from us, pillaging from us. And Trump can't believe how stupid our leaders have been in terms of these incredibly reckless trade and economic policies, irresponsible, that allowed these countries to have practically unfettered access to our massive market, the biggest market in the world, the richest, wealthiest market in the world. And yet these other countries were putting high tariffs on our goods or blocking us completely from being able to sell in their market. So notice you have all of these talking heads, all of these Democrats, many Republicans, all these newspapers, all these fake news people on CNBC or Bloomberg, or tariffs are going to kill America. Tariffs are bad for the economy. Tariffs are going to lead to recession. Tariffs are going to lead to inflation. The sky's going to fall. It didn't fall for Canada over the last 30 years. Didn't fall for China. Didn't fall for Japan. Didn't fall for Germany. Didn't fall for all of the European Union. In other words, they were imposing high tariffs on us, our goods. The sky didn't fall. They did very well. They never had a better 30-year run. So I don't get it. When other countries apply predatory tariffs or high tariffs on us, that's okay. But when we finally respond and put our country first, and by the way, I'm going to get to this in greater detail, okay? But you got to trust me on this. Even these tariffs by Trump, if you want to know the truth, I think they're great. I love them. Please don't get me wrong. But even Trump himself said these are, quote, discount reciprocal tariffs. For example, China's got a 69% tariff. We're only tariffing them 34%. Basically half. You know, Sandy was going with the numbers with me this morning, and she said, the European Union, they tariff us 39%. Trump's retaliatory tariff, 20%. So, to me, he can be tariffing them even more. They're still getting a good bargain. You charge us 39, we charge you 20, and you're complaining? So this idea that the sky is going to fall, well, it didn't fall for everybody else. They've been doing it for 30 years. Why suddenly now is it going to fall for us? Because we are defending ourselves and putting some balance and leveling out the playing field. No. What they understand now is this is a declaration of economic nationalism. This is a declaration of America first. That in order to avoid these 25% tariffs, other companies from other countries are going to come and build plants and factories here in America. And they're going to have to hire American workers. And they're going to be paying them not $3-4 an hour like they've been doing in Mexico or Brazil or Thailand or whatever, or Mexico. You're going to pay $25-30 an hour. Good paying blue collar jobs. In other words, the war on the middle class is over. And the days of America last are over. That's why they're all going crazy. They understand now this is a mortal blow to economic globalization and to globalism itself. Listen now to President Trump. He understands what the stakes are. His presidency will stand or fall now on the Trump tariff regime. Roll cut 1, Mike.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again.
Yes, baby.
Going to make it wealthy, good and
yes,
wealthy.
Yes, baby. You had me at hello. Yes, baby. Finally, a president that will defend American interests, American jobs, American manufacturing, the American worker. The Democrats, however, and their media enablers and allies, if you've noticed, are singing a very different tune. Hakeem Jeffries, and I'm going to play the cut on the other side, the leader of the Democrats in the House, said this will be recession day. They're now all predicting doom and gloom, that this is going to lead to boost inflation. It is going to slow economic growth. It is going to raise prices everywhere, and that this will lead to a massive recession, maybe even a Great Depression. They're lying. More fear-mongering, more panic porn. Yesterday was our day. 6:32 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, I want to play a cut of President Trump, and the reason why I'm playing the cut, maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse. It's how he pretty much ends his massive, his big, huge Rose Garden ceremony yesterday. By the way, it was an absolute PR media coup. He was teasing the event. The White House was teasing the event all day Tuesday, much of the day Wednesday, yesterday. And people had no idea what exactly were going to be in these tariffs. Was it going to be a 10% tariff, a 20% tariff, a 25% tariff? How much would it be for the EU? How much for China? How much for Mexico? How much for Canada? How much for whatever, India, Brazil, Australia? So literally the entire world on bated breath were tuning in and watching Trump's announcement. Billions of people around the world watched, heard, and followed what Trump did. From a political point of view, just a narrow political point of view, it was an absolute coup. It was a brilliant, brilliant move on his part. And it was done on purpose. Trump realizes now by making this move This is it now. He is going to break the United States, free us, break us away from all the other tariffs that these countries have been imposing on us for the last 30 years. But he is now really shattering the New World Order. Economic globalization, the era of open borders and so-called free trade are over. Globalism is over. And he's telling everybody, the globalists will rage. The special interests will rage. Those that have been ripping us off, all these other governments around the world, will rage. The Democrats and the Republicans in this country who are in bed with the globalists will rage. But this will begin the new dawn in America. Listen now to Trump saying history will look back on this day the way they do on key dates in American history. This is the rebirth of America's economic independence, the rebirth of our manufacturing, the rebirth of our middle working class, the rebirth of America's wealth, true wealth. Roll cut 18, Mike.
This will be a very big moment. I think you're going to remember today. It's going to be a free nation that we're dealing with. We're going to have a very free and beautiful nation. It's going to be Liberation Day in America, and it's going to be a day that hopefully you're going to look back in years to come and you're going to say, you know, he was right. This has turned out to be one of the most important days in the history of our country. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you, everybody.
God bless you. No, really, God bless you. I want to read this from Mark on Messenger because I think he really hit the nail on the head. And I think it captures the sentiment, frankly, tens of millions of people in the heartland. Really, it doesn't matter whether it's Alabama or Georgia or Utah or Missouri or Ohio or Michigan or Wisconsin, or they have been waiting 30 years for this because it's their communities that have suffered. Frankly, the coastal elites have done very well. I think it's part of the reason why our country's become so divided is because of the consequences of this free trade and this economic globalism. But the heartland has been suffering, bleeding, hemorrhaging jobs, factories, their wealth. Really, they've replaced those factories with fentanyl. I mean, if you really want to understand the fentanyl crisis in a nutshell, there was so much despair and misery and economic poverty that was unleashed by this disastrous trade, these disastrous trade policies, that eventually fentanyl filled that gap. And now they see a light at the end of the tunnel. This is from Mark, and I think the passion and just the analysis itself, I think, captures really the voice of the middle American. Jeff, please remind everyone, people seem to forget, but this country thrived on tariffs, and we will thrive again on tariffs. How these other countries got away with raping us all these years is mind-boggling. We don't need outrageous, useless policies that benefited other countries and Democrat moronic ideas. All we needed was a new president with common sense. It is America first, now, and forever. A patriot. That's all we needed. A patriot with common sense. Now, we've got callers. I want to play, please indulge me, okay? I want to play a few more clips. Because Trump, and this is what was so brilliant about yesterday, he laid out, you want to see how much the world has been ripping us off for the last 30 years? And his point again and again is, they declared economic war on us. These so-called friends and allies. They've been waging war on us for 30 years. 30 years. And he goes, you want to see how much they've been ripping us off and taking advantage of us? Like, in other words, hey, I'm ending this economic war that the world has been waging on us. It is the beginning of the end. Because we're going to shut the whole thing down by standing up for ourselves. Listen now to Trump. Roll cut 4, Dan.
But those days are over. Let me offer just a few examples of the vicious attacks our workers have faced for so many years. The United States charges other countries only a 2.4 tariff on motorcycles. Meanwhile, Thailand and others are charging much higher prices, like 60%. India charges 70%. Vietnam charges 75%, and others are even higher than that. Likewise, until today, the United States has for decades charged a 2.5 tariff. Think of that, 2.5% on foreign-made automobiles.
50%, 60%, 70%. That's what they charge on our for example, our Harley Davidson motorcycles. What do we charge their motorcycles coming in? 2.4%. Who's winning this? Of course they are. Oh, we can't sell our goods. It doesn't matter how competitive you are. It doesn't matter how good of a bike you make at a cheap price. You can't compete with a 50, 60, 70% tariff. No one's going to buy your motorcycle. But what's 2.4%? That's peanuts. So that's what I'm talking about. They've been charging tariffs on us for decades. We can't sell in their countries, but they're dumping everything they have on our country. It gets even worse. Listen now. He mentioned cars. And by the way, he's completely right. Do you know that Germany charges a 10% tariff on all of our cars going in? That is 4 times higher than what we charge on German cars. Whatever it is. I don't know, Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW, whatever. So they can charge us a tariff 4 times higher than on our cars. Our GM, Ford, whatever, going to their country. But we have to keep what? We have to keep giving them basically, essentially, unfettered access to our market while they block us in their market? Well, of course the Germans are complaining. They've been screwing us for the last 30 years. Listen now. This is South Korea. And by the way, we've got 29,000 troops defending South Korea. For what, 50-some years, 60 years now? Here's what they do to protect their auto industry. Roll cut 5. Dan.
81% of the cars in South Korea are made in South Korea. 94% of the cars in Japan are made in Japan. Toyota sells 1 million foreign-made automobiles into the United States, and General Motors sells almost none. Ford sells very little. None of our companies are allowed to go into other countries. And I say that, friend and foe. And in many cases, the friend is worse than the foe in terms of trade. But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk.
He's completely right. To me, what's mind-boggling is, why did it take so long? They bled us dry. Finally, a patriot has emerged. So I want to open up the phone line. 617-266-6868 is the number. Trump unrolls his tariffs. Agree, disagree. 649 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, I want to ask all of you, what do you make of Trump's decision now to roll out his tariffs? Some of them are going to be 25%. On many goods and products. In fact, I'll give you the breakdown a little bit later in the show. But these are going to be substantial tariffs on all foreign-made cars. It doesn't matter what country they come from, 25%. Steel, aluminum, no matter where, 25%. And the stock market is nervous. Wall Street is nervous. The media is nervous. In fact, they're more than nervous. They're saying the sky is going to fall. The Democrats are predicting this will trigger a recession. Many Republicans are saying it's going to lead to higher inflation, higher prices, slower economic growth. In other words, doom and gloom. Are you concerned about the tariffs? Do you support Trump imposing them? Or do you think it's a bad economic decision? You know where I stand. I want to hear from you, Kuhner Country. 617-266-6868. To tariff or not to tariff? That is the question. Joe in Abington. Thanks for holding, Joe, and welcome.
Jeff, I love you, man, and I love Trump, but this is just insane. You keep saying that we're tariffing China, we're tariffing South Korea. We're not. We're tariffing Americans. That $40,000 car made from steel from another country, we don't have the production for right now, which will take years to make, now costs $50,000. So $10,000 more if I want to buy my wife a car. And already, Pete Navarro's on Fox saying, well, this will bring in so much money from low-income Americans who have to buy these parts, washers, dryers, everything that's being tariffed, and it could raise the price of those things on Americans. And so it's not the other companies, they raise the price, and then they're going to take that money. I get it. We had to pay $8 trillion, $2 trillion for the tax cuts, and $6 trillion for the COVID. They had to do it in his term, but that's 25% of the 30-something debt. And he's not going to pay down the debt with it. He's going to use it so the parliamentarian can bring down more taxes. And so it's not going to go towards the debt. So there's nothing good coming from this because it will take years to bring that manufacturing back. We'll have to pay them all those years. He'll be out of office. The next president will stop it. They're projecting them out 10 years to make it balance. They're never going to be on 10 years. He can only be president for another 4. So this is just, there's no way this ends up in the long run winning. It's already going to slow growth in the next 2 months. And if it goes below a certain amount, that's a recession.
Well, Joe, look, respectfully, I disagree on almost every point. Number one, throughout most of our history, literally going back to our founding fathers, we had high tariffs. From our inception, we had high tariffs. And every time we've had high tariffs, you know what we've had? Massive economic growth, massive industrial expansion, the greatest economy in the history of the world. And workers and middle-class people benefited. And I can refute every single point by point. Number one, we're going to be collecting almost $1 trillion in revenue. What Trump is going to do, he's going to lower taxes. And what he eventually wants to do, and I think this is the magic bullet, this is going to be what's going to make us economically invincible, like we were all throughout the 19th century. Remember, throughout the 19th century, it went from 1789 really until the 1930s. We had something called the American system, which was based on a high protective tariff. So literally for about 150 years, we had a high protective tariff. We had the richest middle working class in the world. We had the greatest industry and manufacturing base in the history of the world. That's the reason why we won 2 world wars. That's why we became an economic superpower. The more that we have gone to free trade, the poorer and poorer American middle class, working class people have become. Why? Yeah, you can buy a car much cheaper. It's true. One of these garbage cars from South Korea or from China, but Americans are out of work. So, you can buy all the plastic toys you want. Yes, they're very cheap. Yes, you can buy toys. You can buy all sorts of stuff because they use slave labor. But where are the jobs here? And the few jobs that there are here are service sector jobs. What are you going to make? 10, 12, 14 bucks an hour? Scraping to get by? We don't have a middle class anymore. The middle class is literally being destroyed in front of our eyes. Now, it's not just free trade, but it's a major reason. Trump is going to reverse all of that. And what he wants to get to is we don't pay income taxes. At least people under a certain, like $150,000 or $200,000 a year income, you pay zero income taxes. Zero. The only tax you pay is the tax on these imports, if you want to buy these imports. But what's also going to happen is people are going to start buying American cars. People are going to start buying American goods, American products, because now they're not being priced out of the market. Now you can actually make sneakers and make a profit because you're not getting them dumped from China because they're using slave labor. So A, you're going to be able to buy American, which is key. You're going to be able to make American, which is key. And everybody's going to be much wealthier and much better off. Now, this idea of, well, it's going to take 10 years. Trump won't be in power in 10 years. First of all, J.D. Vance is going to win the next election. I'm telling you right now, Trump is going to unleash an economic boom we've never seen before in the history of the world. You're going to look at two terms of J.D. Vance. Vance, like me, is an economic nationalist. He is an economic patriot. He loves these tariffs. The tariffs are going to stay in place under J.D. So number one, if it's 10 years, that's no problem. But it's not going to be 10 years. You're looking at 18 months to 2 years. Already now, huge, you got Canadian car companies are saying we're relocating to the United States. Mazda, I just spoke to the Mazda dealer. I did an incredible test drive on some of their cars. They said now they're going to be relocating plants here in the United States. Nissan relocating, making plants in their plants in the United States. Volkswagen, Audi relocating in their plants in the United States. You're looking now at millions and millions and millions of good paying American manufacturing jobs. And they're not talking 10 years. They're talking 2027. 2026. So I don't know where you're getting these figures. So, Joe, I heard the exact same arguments when Trump raised the tariff on all these goods coming in from China. That the sky was going to fall, that it was going to lead to massive inflation, it was going to lead to a recession, it was going to lead to economic hardship, and we had the greatest economy in the history of the world. So I've heard all the doom and gloom before, Joe. It's been wrong before, it's wrong now, and it'll be wrong again. Final word to you.
I wish I agreed. I wish that this had any basis in history or fact. But the problem is that they can't build these factories. How are they going to build steel? Where are they going to do it? The things that he wants to do would take years. There's just no way. You can have all the desire you want. And plus, the price will be higher. What he's making is a consumption tax, a tax on people who have to buy things instead of people who choose to buy things. And so that's inflation. There's just no way to put it in any other terms. Things will cost more for the next several years, 10 to 25% more. And now we were freaking out.
Where are you getting this? Like you're making this up, this 10 to 25%. Where are you getting this?
Those are the tariffs he's putting on these countries.
Yeah, but oh my God, you actually think
we were freaking out at 9%?
Joe, you actually think when you impose a 25% tariff that it automatically goes to the price of a car? You don't realize that many times companies and countries eat the tariff? You don't realize that? Never, ever in history, ever. If you say put a 50% tariff, it goes right away on the product. No, that never happens. Some of it, yes, will go onto the product. But, for example, the tariffs Trump imposed on China, the Chinese government ate it. The Chinese companies ate it, the whole thing. So that's number one. Number two, we make steel in Pennsylvania. You realize that. He's literally going to save the steel industry. And he's going to make it the basis now for a revitalized American manufacturing. So this idea that somehow, it's going to take years to make steel plants. No, we're just not going to completely destroy our steel industry as we've been doing for 30 years. And then you say you wish everything I said had a basis in history and fact. Okay. 1719 to 1932, 33 under FDR. FDR was the big free trader. Okay. From 1789 to 1933, did we not have a high protective tariff? Yes or no?
Yes, but we also had 90%, what they had then on anyone making over a certain income, 90% tax. And so, I mean, that was crazy. So there were a lot of other things offsetting those. And you were saying Harley Davidson.
No, we never had a 90% tax on people making. You're talking about Eisenhower. You're talking about the 1950s on the elites, and then they had tremendous loopholes, which ended up being about essentially a 15-20% tax because they had so many carve-outs and loopholes. So you're jumping decades. Look it up. It's called the American system. It was literally introduced in 1789 by George Washington himself, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, Benjamin Franklin, all of our founding fathers. And then it was also then reinforced by Henry Clay, Andrew Jackson, and the Republicans in the early to middle of the 19th century. And it led to the greatest economic, manufacturing, industrial expansion in the history of the world. No income taxes. Remember, the income tax only comes in 1913. So for much of our history, we had no income tax. The only tax was the tariff. And the country never fared economically any better. So all I'm telling you is high tariffs work. And then, Joe, this is what I don't get. If this is all such a disaster, as you claim it's going to be, well, Canada has high tariffs on us. Germany has high tariffs. The whole European Union has high tariffs. Japan has high tariffs. South Korea has high tariffs. Taiwan has high tariffs. China has high tariffs. How come their economies aren't collapsing for 30 years? How come they don't have runaway inflation? How come they're not facing recession after recession after recession? So they've been implementing tariffs and predatory, massive tariffs against us. That's okay. But when we reciprocate and we're only doing it at half the level they are, it's the end of the world. Can you explain that one to me, Joe?
Yeah, I can put it like this, Jeff. Why are tariffs on Harley Davidson and our companies bad? Because we can't sell our products there, and what happens is why can't we sell them there? Because Harley Davidson doesn't eat the price, the American government doesn't eat the price, the Chinese consumer eats the price. So our products cost more over there. So the companies are going to pass that cost on to us. Ford is going to pass that on from steel. You can't just transfer the base, that manufacturing base in 18 months. It's just not possible to buy a factory, build a factory. I mean, the stuff that he's putting on is so vast that there's no way to avoid about 2 to 3 years of pain, and that's his whole presidency. It's just not in the world we live in. There's just no way to do it without.
So your solution is what? We just keep getting ripped off, like this whole Ponzi scheme, this whole corrupt system, this whole predatory system that has been destroying our economy and our manufacturing and our middle class for the last 30 years. We just keep this thing going. I mean, I think you're completely wrong. There's going to be very little pain. I disagree. I told you. You guys made the same argument when he imposed China's the biggest fish, and he imposed massive tariffs on them. And all of you guys came out saying it's going to wreck the economy. It's going to lead to record inflation. In fact, we had record low inflation. We had the greatest economic boom in American history. The middle class never did better. Businesses never did better. Take-home pay was never better. So the cost of living was never lower. The standard of living was never higher. Okay? So we've been down this road. We've seen this movie. It works. But, okay, that first prediction failed. But let's just say, for the sake of argument now, you're saying, Jeff, no, we just can't do it in 2 years. It's just, no, it's going to be pain and pain and pain and misery and skyrocketing prices, and everything's going to go through the roof. Okay, let's just, for the sake of argument. So we just let this keep going? That's your solution?
Jeff, the tariffs he put on China cost the farmers. Did he not have to give them $400 billion during his presidency last time because they got so crushed by the China tariffs? He had to bail them out. because they were so hurt.
Billion. Joe, where do you come up with these numbers?
It's a fact. $400 billion he gave to the farmers. He bragged about. These are facts, Jeff. You got to Google it right now.
He gave them $15 billion. What $400 billion? Do you know what $400 billion is? He gave them $15 billion. And but I just gave, and how many manufacturing jobs did he bring back? How much of our industrial base did he manage to rehabilitate and revitalize? So your argument is this: they can continue to screw us, they can continue to rip us off, and we just have to stand there and take it. That's your argument. Because the same media that lied to you about Russia, by the way, I can go down every point, that lied to us about NAFTA, that lied to us about the World Trade Organization, that lied to us about free trade with China. I could go on. They lied about everything. Remember, they said we pass NAFTA, Mexico will become so freaking wealthy, we'll not have a single illegal come in. That's what they said. They lied. They said if we have free trade with China, that there'd be such a massive middle class in China that it would lead to a democratic transformation of China. That never happened. In other words, everything they said they said we were going to have trade surplus after trade surplus after trade surplus. That's what they said. And it turned out to be trillions and trillions in trade deficits. So the same people that have lied to us for 30 years on the economy, on trade, on Russia, on Trump, on the Hunter Biden laptop, I could go issue after issue, on stolen elections, but suddenly now they have our best interests at heart. We should listen to them. The same ones who predicted doom and gloom when he put the tariffs on China. And that's the best they can come up with. Well, he had to give $15 billion to the farmers. Okay. And then let me just say this. To me, this is the coup de grace. Did the pandemic not teach us anything? I mean, seriously, are we living now in some kind of a bubble? Did we not realize how much we rely and depend dangerously upon China for our medicines, for our most basic supplies? That literally we can't even produce enough insulin in our country because we rely so much on China, aspirin, masks. I could go on and on and on. Now, if we lose the last steel mill that we have, the last steel plant in the United States, I want you to understand the stake, okay? This is what you're forcing on the country, Joe. This is where we are. That last steel plant falls in Pennsylvania. All of our steel, or most of our steel, is going to come from China. We want to build tanks? China. We want to build missiles? China. We want to build drones? China. We want to build aircraft carriers? China. So China could militarily cut us off at the knees anytime they want, because we've made ourselves so dependent on them. I don't think so, Joe. So I'll tell you what. Call me in 2 years. I mean, you can call me whenever you want, but call me in 2 years, and I guarantee you inflation will be lower, the economy will be booming, and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in added wealth from all of these new industries and factories will be here in the United States. Everything that you're predicting, this doom and gloom, okay, everything that you're predicting is going to be the exact opposite. Because I've seen this movie again and again and again. But that's me. Joe, thank you for that good-spirited debate. Paul in New Hampshire. Thanks for holding, Paul, and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. How you doing this morning?
Good. How are you, Paul?
Good. So going back to what Joe was saying, there's going to be some pain. We just have to do a economic enema. We need to clear out what we've been doing, and it all started after World War II. And I'd like to see Trump go to the next level and start talking the first one of these countries that start squawking and going at him, like South Korea or Germany, Start closing those bases. Tell them we're going to bring our boys back and our money back. This all started after the Marshall Plan. We had all these grandiose ideas that if we spread the wealth, there'd be peace on earth. Well, that hasn't worked out. So I think, in a sense, Joe's right. There is going to be some pain, but we need to go on a little bit of a consumption diet. I mean, we're buying a lot of the crap we're buying we even need. Maybe we have to tighten our belts for a while and let this, catch up to us, but eventually we'll be healthier. And you're right, a lot of these tariffs will be absorbed by these other countries, but I wouldn't even say call you back in a year. I'd say in a couple of weeks we'll be able to see the results of this. And I think these countries, they've already shown they're going to fall into line. But the ones that really squawk the most will start tightening the belt even tighter, including foreign aid and these foreign bases we have.
Paul, I agree with you. Look, how long have we been protecting Germany? And yet we find out now for 30 years they've been waging these unfair trade practices against us. Literally, how many cars have they, I'm just giving cars as an example. How many cars have they sold in America? And yet we can barely sell one Ford or one GM because they've put the tariff so high. And then they say, well, how dare Trump implement a tariff now? Friends don't do this to friends. You've been ripping us off for 30 years. No, here's the analogy I want everybody to think about. If you're an addict, if you're dependent upon other countries, which is like heroin, well, yeah, you cut off the heroin supply. Yeah, you're going to go cold turkey. It's going to be hard. But then you get healthy. 719 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, and I'm not the only one that's made this analogy. Some really good columnists, journalists who specialize in economics have made the very same point. Trump has made the same point. So has Peter Navarro and Howard Lutnick and his economic team and his trade team. Really over the last, you can go back 50, 60 years, but really the last 30 years, okay, to really simplify it. Think of the United States economy as someone addicted to heroin, a heroin addict. Well, what are we addicted to, Jeff? We're addicted to cheap consumer goods brought in from, say, China or other countries around the world, where they use very cheap labor or slave labor. And so they just, and junk. They're junk. And they dump them on the American market. And that's what's been killing American companies, American manufacturers, and outsourcing so many of our jobs. So Americans are they're hooked on cheap consumer goods from other countries because of these disastrous trade deals, combined with runaway deficits. And it's not just government deficits, spend. Look at credit card debt, private debt, credit card debt. We are the most indebted country, not just in terms of the government public debt, but our own private debt. You know, what I have in debt, what you have in debt, what most Americans have in debt on credit cards. We're the most indebted country in the history of the world. So all we do is print money, which leads to more inflation and more debt and cheap consumer goods and this constant out of control spending. Now, eventually, and every economist will tell you, this is going to kill you. And I don't mean eventually 100 years from now, or I'm talking 5 years, 10 years. This can't go on much longer. You can't have a $37 trillion national debt. You can't have a first world economic powerhouse, a dynamic first world economy with no industry, with no manufacturing, if you're not making anything. It can't go on. And consumers can only take on debt. Look, eventually you got to pay your credit cards off. And eventually the interest on the debt it's 20%, 18%, whatever it is. It depends on your, a MasterCard or Visa or American Express. The point is, after a while, you can't even finance your own debt. So the whole thing goes kaput. Now, what Trump is saying is, we're going to save the whole country. We're going to wean us off these cheap consumer goods. And we're also going to free ourselves from these high tariffs that other countries have been imposing on us for the last 30 years. So, because our people can't sell abroad. And instead, by putting these tariffs now, and Sandy was dead on during while we were off air. She said, Jeff, what Joe is not understanding is already you've got all of these foreign car companies. I don't care if they're German, South Korean, Japanese. It doesn't matter. Chinese electric car companies. They're already announcing big plants being built in the United States to avoid these tariffs. So they're going to be building here, creating the cars here, hiring American workers at good wages here. In other words, and by the way, that's why he's got Doge, he's cutting spending. So we stop printing money, we stop running these out of control deficits, and he's going to start cutting our taxes. So we have a lot more money in our pocket. Now, when you wean someone off of heroin, when you cut off the drugs, when you cut off the heroin, they go cold turkey. And when they go cold turkey, right? I mean, it's painful. It's not pleasant. But it's not 2 years. It's not 3 years. It's not 10 years. It's quick. It's painful. It's quick, but it takes a couple of weeks, a month, 2 months, whatever. But then you start getting healthy again. And then every day you get healthier and healthier and healthier. And before you know it, knock on wood, God willing, you're as healthy as you ever were. And you can live. And you can survive. And you can thrive. And that's essentially think of us now as a heroin addict. And Trump is saying, you're going to rehab. No more drugs for you, period. Agree, disagree. Listen now to Hakeem. You know what? I'm not going to play the cut on the other side. Then I'm going to take the calls. Very, very quickly. The tariffs in particular, just so that you know, are designed to protect really these 7 sectors of the economy that have been decimated over the last 30 years. And that is not just the deindustrialization of America, but really genuinely threaten our national security. The auto sector is now going to be protected and it's going to flourish. Lumber, pharmaceuticals. Remember, the supply chains, the medicines that we found out were all being made in China. Well, they're going to start being made here. Chips for computers, phones, drones, satellites here in America. Steel, copper, aluminum. All of those sectors now are not just going to be protected, they're going to be revitalized. That we need for our military, our defense, our very national security. Trump is on the move. He now says this will be the most historic presidency in over 100 years. And I agree with him. 7:32 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, this is the prevailing orthodoxy. And generally, orthodoxies are usually wrong. That's been my experience as an historian, as a radio talk show host, as a commentator for God knows how many decades. And the orthodoxy now says free trade is good. Fair trade, which is all Trump is asking for, is bad. Listen now to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, pretty much summing up what the media has been saying, what the Democrats are saying, what many establishment Republicans are saying, and what Joe and Abington essentially was saying, that these tariffs by Trump are going to do tremendous economic damage, lead to higher inflation, slow economic growth, and yes, trigger a recession. It's not Liberation Day. It's Recession Day. Roll cut 31. Dan.
Republicans are crashing the American economy in real time and driving us to a recession. This is not Liberation Day, it's Recession Day in the United States of America. That's what the Trump tariffs are going to do. Crash the economy, which has been happening since January 20th of this year. And the American people are taking note of it in community after community after community.
In other words, the sky is falling. The sky is falling. They're doing the Chicken Little routine again. It's back to their COVID playbook. Panic porn, fear-mongering, hysteria. It's the end of the world. Oh, my God, the end is nigh. He's going to crash the economy. The whole thing. We're looking at the mother of all recessions. Maybe even a depression. It's all over. Calm down. Have a drink. Take it easy. Everything is going to be fine. He imposed tariffs on China the first term. Everything went great. Same thing is going to happen now. Okay? Relax. They're going to be shown for the liars that they are, the propagandists that they are, again. But that's me. I want to hear from you. So, the Kuhner Country poll question of the day, sponsored by Mario's. Mario's Quality Roofing, Siding, and Windows. Trump has now rolled out his new tariffs. In your view, are they, and this was done yesterday, was yesterday A, Liberation Day? Is Trump right? Or is it B, Recession Day? Are the Democrats and the media, the fake news media, correct? A, Liberation Day, B, Recession Day. You can vote on our webpage, wrko.com/Kuhner, wrko.com/Kuhner, Kuhn as in national ER. You can also vote via X. I was active again last night. My handle, one word, at the Kuhner Report, Kuhn as in national ER, at the Kuhner Report. Lines are loaded. Anita in the Freedom State, Florida. Thanks for holding, Anita, and welcome.
Hey, Jeff, how are you today?
Very good.
Liberation Day.
I was very happy. I've been waiting 30 years for yesterday, Anita. I was doing cartwheels in my house. I almost gave myself a hernia, but let that go, Anita.
Well, I called you last time we were talking about supply chain, probably over a year ago, but I'm so happy to talk to you today. I'm glad I got on. I'm going to help you with a little history lesson. Especially, I hope Joe is still listening. I started in logistics in 1985, so I've seen the whole transition. A little bit of history. The World Trade Organization was developed to help fair trade, as you probably know. Most people don't know any of this history, so it's hard for people like Joe to grasp. Well, back in 1990, China was given MFN status. That's most favored nation status. That put them on equal par with, like, Guatemala, where they're making baskets or whatever, right? Well, back then, China, the government of China would issue what's called a master certificate to freight forwarders for export. There were about 10 of them back in the 80s, early 90s. Once MFN status was granted by Clinton, basically, the World Trade Organization, and Clinton supported it, NAFTA was the beginning of it as well. The freight forward is surged. All you have to do is Google logistics providers in China. went into the thousands, Jeff, because all of a sudden they're an exporter. That was the huge shift, taking away our manufacturing of semiconductors, of footwear industry. I was started in sales. I used to visit people we exported one by one. All those companies were gone. That means middle America is gone. And what you've had over 30 years is this subtle, gradual shift left where our manufacturing is gone. And that plays right into the globalist elitist plans where you get people used to it, more dependent on the government, and normal. And so now this is not only a big industrial swing for this country, but the beginning of a cultural swing, I hope, back to Americans to understand the greatness that was America in manufacturing. And so I do think also where Joe is concerned about the day-to-day, the visual, oh, I'm going to pay more. I had visited about 4 years ago or 5 years ago when the tariffs came in, the 302s came in, a valve company. And I said, gee, are you raising it 25% on your product? Oh, no, we can absorb it easily. I think you'll see these countries automatically lower their tariffs a lot right away. And then you'll see a lot of companies absorbing it as well. This is the beginning. He's going to be remembered. You and I will be dust, Jeff. Trump is the new industrial revolution. Liberation Day is today.
Oh, Anita, you know, trade is a bit of a dry topic, and it's a bit of a technical topic. And I think this is why your call is so outstanding. You made a dry technical topic, very engaging and interesting, but also very easy to understand. Anita, really outstanding job. Superb call. You absolutely nailed it. This was, and I saw it in the 1990s personally. When I was at Ohio University, I was doing my PhD coursework. I was also a teaching assistant. So I would teach 2 classes a week. And so I would talk to the students, before class, after class. And this was in Athens, Ohio. And they had just passed NAFTA. And it was heartbreaking. One student after another, many of them, their families served in the military. Their brothers were in the military. Their father had served either, Vietnam or the Korean War, their grandparents in World War II. These were from very good, patriotic, middle-class homes. And a lot of them from small towns. And they just were, they were stunned. Within a year, they said, Professor Kuhner, they all called me Professor Kuhner. Professor Kuhner, they go, we had 5-6 factories in our town. And my father worked in those factories, or my mother worked in those factories. And, they paid for our home, our mortgage, food on the table. These were good jobs. And people were proud to work in those factories, and they worked hard, and they were so proud. And the moment NAFTA was passed, they said, we heard the sucking sound. The steel mills, gone. The textile mills, gone. The auto companies, the car plants, gone. Many of them just went to Mexico, relocated there for $2 an hour or $1 an hour or whatever, and tax-free. They just made those products and rolled them right back into the United States. Or they went to China. And they said, everything is gone. Nobody can get a job. And not only can nobody get a job, nobody can then sell a home. So everything you worked for, instantly gone. And they were hurt. They felt profoundly betrayed. These were people like, what did we do wrong? Like, what did we do to deserve this? And that's when I became an adamant anti-free trader. I said, this is going to kill our country. I said, this is going to kill the United States. This is going to kill the West. And I saw clearly that China was going to be the number one beneficiary. And that's what we did for 30 years. These Judases in both parties, and they are Judases, sold away our wealth, our manufacturing, betrayed our people. Patriots, they're good enough to fight and die in foreign wars, but they're not good enough to defend their factories and their jobs and their communities. And they sold them down the river. It's over. America is back. 749 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer, 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, this is from Dave, our Western PA constitutionalist correspondent. And here's what he messaged me on Messenger. Jeff, you are completely right about the globalists trying to kill the America's steel industry. It was President Jimmy Carter that killed steel manufacturing back in the 1970s when he stopped the production of the B-1 bomber. Bingo. Bingo, Dave. That was the beginning. That was the beginning. All right. This is from Eric. Jeff, it's plain and simple. If you're not for made in America, you're not for America. If you're upset about tariffs and at Trump, you should be upset at all before him, going as far back as FDR, allowing factories closing and helping companies leaving America, leaving us starving. Since then, Trump is righting what went wrong. And it wasn't just China, Jeff. It's been a gang rape of America. Well, that's what Trump, I thought, brilliantly demonstrated yesterday. I mean, holy shamoly. I mean, he's saying here, we charge a 10% tariff. I'm just going to use, examples of countries. Thailand charges us 90%. South Korea, we're protecting South Korea for how many years now? 70 years? We charge them 10%. They charge us 60%. And basically, they have all these non-trade barriers. It's almost impossible to sell anything, regardless of the 60% or not. Japan has been ripping us off. The Europeans have been ripping us off. India has been gouging us. Canada, Mexico, blank you, they've been taking advantage of us. You run down the list. Like, who hasn't been screwing us? That's the question. So yeah, Eric, it's been a gang rape. And Trump is saying, no, that's it. America is not being raped anymore. That's it. That's it. And he's the bad guy. One more. This is from Mark. Jeff, I was traveling in Mexico, and what I saw, I couldn't believe. The GM and Ford plants. The GM plant in Mexico literally went for a mile. It was that massive. Thousands and thousands and thousands of trucks lining the plant. Made in Mexico, and they were getting ready to send them and export them right back into the United States tax-free. Ford is so big in Mexico that it has its own exit on the highway. Holy mackerel. Holy mackerel. Listen now to President Trump. When it comes to the auto sector, the auto industry, what I just read to you now, what they did to us since NAFTA for the last 30 years, it's over. Roll cut 5A, Dan.
Don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen, and they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe. That's why, effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles. Thank you.
Those cheering in the background, United Auto Workers. United Auto Workers love this. Love this. In Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Ohio, in the so-called Rust Belt, when I say they love these tariffs, they love these tariffs. They've been begging for these tariffs for decades. 617-266-6868. Stephen in Newton. Thanks for holding, Stephen, and welcome.
Jeff?
Hi, Stephen.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Great. Oh, I'm fine. I'm shopping at Walmart.
Trying to take advantage of those cheap Chinese goods while you can, huh, Stephen?
Great.
Stephen, what's on your mind, my friend?
Well, I called Sandy earlier, and I just wanted to say, didn't the tariffs work in his first term? I mean, everything was low. Prices were low. Everything, and the supply chain was great. And what did he do then? I just and everybody's complaining. Just give the guy a chance. They don't want to give him a chance because I think they're afraid he might succeed and they will lose power.
Well, I think, Stephen, really, you put your finger right on it. They're going to lose power. And they've been building towards this project for the last 40 years. And they wanted to, they want to take away our freedom and our independence. Ultimately, what's globalism about? They want to absorb the United States into the New World Order. And China, they made a bet on China 30 years ago that's why China and the globalists are tied at the hip. That China, they believe, was now the new rising power, the new superpower, the new, if you want to call it, the new Roman Empire. What we were to Great Britain, say over 100 years ago. Great Britain was the great dominant power of the 19th century. Apparently his empire was so vast that they say the sun never slept on the Union Jack because they had colonies all over the world. They had them in India, Africa, the Middle East. I mean, literally, if the sun rotates rotates around the globe, the earth rotates around the sun, as the sun rises, nowhere does it set where there's not the Union Jack. So that was the power of Great Britain. And then everybody realized, no, American manufacturing, American industry, the American continent, the American free enterprise system was something so productive. It produced so much wealth. They had never seen an economic powerhouse like this before in human history. And that America was going to be the leader of the 20th century. Well, the globalists made a bet that they were going to make China now the new America. What we were to Great Britain, China was going to be to us. And so the goal was to shift trillions of dollars of our wealth to build up China, communist China, and to send most of our manufacturing, most of our wealth, most of our products, most of our factories to China, and to steal our technology and hand it over to China. And the Chinese began immediately with the biggest military buildup in history to challenge us, to rival us, and eventually to displace us. What Trump understands is, in order to regain our full independence as a country, we have to regain our economic independence. And how do you regain economic independence? Tariffs. Shatter this globalist economic system. Shatter the New World Order. Shatter the World Trade Organization. And this way, if you regain control of your manufacturing, of your industry, if you reindustrialize, China becomes much poorer because we're not sending them all our money and our wealth, but we get much wealthier. We rebuild our middle class. And by regaining control of our economy, we regain control of our borders, we regain control of our immigration, we regain control of everything. And globalism is defeated, and the globalists are defeated. And we check the rise of China. So Trump truly is playing three-dimensional geopolitical chess. And you're right, it's all about power now. It's about power, and it's about other countries. As Trump says, look, I don't blame them. They've been taking us to the cleaners for 30 years. They've been screwing us for 30 years. They've been making money off of us for 30 years. Well, of course they're going to scream bloody murder. If you have an unfair relationship with somebody and you've been using somebody for 30 years and taking advantage of them. You don't want the relationship to change. It's like it's been a one-way street forever. You don't want it to be a two-way street. But Trump is saying, no, we're no longer going to be Uncle Sucker. We're going to be Uncle Sam. And honestly, Stephen, all of this in the nick of time. One more presidential term from Kamala Harris, and I think it'd be over. I really believe it'd be over. For our country, for our Constitution, for our independence, I think China would be the premier dominant power, and we wouldn't be able to catch them. Now, this is at the last possible moment, but I think Trump is genuinely saving our country. Final word to you, Stephen.
Yeah, Jeff. Another thing is that what do you think about these rhinos, Rand Paul? I don't know what's going on with Rand Paul and Anna Paulina Luna. Tim Burchett, this is his name. They voted yesterday to block Trump's Canadian tariffs, the tariffs from Canada. What's going on with that?
Well, Stephen, look, thank you very much for that call, and thank you for mentioning that, because that made my blood boil last night. So just for all of you to understand, again, I could almost do the same show every day. It's just different subject, different target, but it's the same show. Rhinos betray Trump, betray us, ally with the Democrats to sabotage Trump and screw us. So it's just, it's the border, it's the SAVE Act, yesterday it was on tariffs. And in particular, listen now to this. Leftist Tim Kaine, okay? The Joker, Hillary Clinton's running mate, that whack job. He sponsored a resolution, by the way, co-sponsored with Rand Paul. Rand Paul teamed up with, of all people, Tim Kaine, okay? A crazy Tim, lunatic Tim, okay? And they sponsored a resolution that they want to force Trump to not impose the tariffs on Canada. That was the resolution, to force Trump to drop all of the tariffs on Canada, as if somehow we're bullying Canada by imposing these tariffs, even though, as I said, the Canadians have been shafting us for decades. And amazingly, Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, these four Republicans switched, went across the aisle, switched their vote from a no to a yes. And they joined 47 Democrats. And it was a humiliating blow to Trump. Now, luckily, the House is not going to take up this measure. So they're not going to force Trump to drop these tariffs. And Trump he was really angry. He went on Truth Social and said, look, it's not going to get through the House. But even if it does, I'm vetoing this. This is going to meet an immediate veto. But he raged against these four Republicans, saying, you're trying to sabotage me and my policy and my agenda again. And what's really angering him, and he's completely right, is that the Canadian Liberal government still refuses to cut off the massive flow of fentanyl that is pouring into the United States from the north. And as Trump said, how many more Americans have to die? How many more young people have to die? How many more, as he put it, beautiful American families have to be decimated and lose family members? Because the Canadian government will not do what we've asked them to do over and over and over. Stop the flow of illicit drugs, i.e. fentanyl, that is killing our people 100,000 a year. Not just from Canada, it's also coming in a lot from Mexico. But he says, I don't know how many ways I can say it. Stop the fentanyl, we'll lower the tariffs. And so Rand Paul in particular, McConnell, he's a Judas. Susan Collins, Murkowski, we know, they're Judases. But Rand Paul? A two Rand Paul? As Caesar famously said to Brutus, and you too? You stab me in the back too? You stab me too, my dearest friend Brutus. So, A2, Rand Paul. You ally with the left. You ally with the Democrats to stick it to Donald Trump on behalf of Canada so they can continue to allow fentanyl to come into our country? You are playing with the lives of American citizens. You have betrayed the American people, not just Trump, not just the Republican Party, not just the Republican Senate leadership, which is standing by Trump on these tariffs, but you've betrayed the country and all those who've lost loved ones due to this epidemic, this scourge of fentanyl. Honestly, it's disgraceful. It's shameful. And so Trump said he's done with Rand Paul, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him. And this is, again, we talked about it yesterday. We can talk about it every day because it's the story of our time. These Republicans can't help themselves. Notice the Democrats never shiv each other like this. Have you noticed? The Democrats never break ranks. They never shaft each other. They never betray each other. The Republicans, it's like a sport for them. They love it. They're always screwing their own. They're always backstabbing their own. They did it to humiliate Trump. They did it to give the media, the Democrats, and the Canadian Liberal government a talking point. Again, it's going to be blocked in the House, so the tariffs on Canada will remain. But the Canadian media is running wild with this. The new Canadian Liberal government, Mark Carney, that clown, they're running wild with this, saying, you say, even the American Senate is saying Trump is out of control. Democrats, even Republicans, former Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, conservative Rand Paul. This is how wrong Trump is. It's like they get up every day and they say, okay, how are we going to screw Donald Trump today? I'm done with Rand Paul. I'm done with him. I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. Thank you for that call, Stephen. Agree, disagree. Anthony in Michigan. Thanks for holding, Anthony, and welcome.
Dr. Kuhner, a blessing as always. Hey, I got a number of points. Let's get at it. Yes, I agree with this, but I am cautious. I remember Betsy McCauley's 2016 article about outsourcing and how it decimated Ohio. And if you take it for a while, yes, this is going to take a while, but yes, we'll get rid of the cheap goods and we're going to have to buy stuff that's really high content and good. Now, in terms of especially the automotive, right now, Jeff, the whole industry is sort of beholden to what I will call compliance vehicles. You have to meet Aero, you have to meet EPA and Consumer Reports for crash ratings. So the prospect of like a $25,000 car, and this is kind of probably germane to you with kids approaching the driving age, is really difficult. I had a non-proprietary discussion with an auto engineer friend of mine that says they can't do it. Ironically, Elon can with a lower parts count in his new manufacturing process called Unbox. This is why I worry about the home team. So why do we outsource? We couldn't afford vertical integration here, and they balled at the altar of comparative advantage. I saw it, Jeff, in the late 90s. I was working for a small engineering firm, and we got a project for making the inertia reel system for a Jaguar that literally was a ball bearing that went in a circle that would tighten up your shoulder harness in a crash. It really was a pyrotechnic device, and we were doing the CAD modeling on it. And these couple of young Turk engineers walked in, and they're like, "Oh, where are you guys going to build this?" And we're like, "We're just going to outsource it to the Mexicans. It's just a lot cheaper." My final point is, I don't think the jobs are going to be what we think they will be. With AI and robotics on the cusp, those things are going to have to be integrated to make these products affordable here. And I don't think with the Department of Education and NEA, none of that will happen. So there's multiple things going on here that Trump is doing that could allow this?
Well, Anthony, look, you're always very thoughtful. You always look at the big picture on every issue, especially when it comes to cars, automotives. To me, you're basically our expert, our car expert, our automotive expert for me on the Kuhner report. You know Michigan, you know Detroit, and you know the car industry. So you're right. Look, it's not just the tariffs aren't a magic bullet. You got to cut taxes. You've got to deregulate. You've got to create a very positive pro-business climate so people want to invest, people want to create jobs. You've got to improve the quality of education. So when you have a good workforce, that's an educated workforce, that's another incentive for people to, bring factories here and bring manufacturing back. So yeah, Trump has to do other things as well. But, Anthony, it would be really nice to buy American again. It would be really nice to have us buy, made in America products. I can't tell you. I'm just telling you as a citizen, whenever I go shopping, and I'm not a big shopper, but whenever I go shopping, I want to buy underwear, not made in America. I want to buy jeans, not made in America. Sneakers, not made in America. Even cars, many cars, not made in America. Like, nothing is made. TVs aren't, computers, laptops. I mean, nothing is made in America. And I want to buy made in America. I really do. And I'm even willing to pay a little bit more. I want to even more than a little bit. I'll pay more. Now, cut our taxes so we have more money, raise our wages, more take-home pay as we had under the first term of Trump. So if I have to pay a little more, I have the money to pay more. Because ultimately, I want to see Americans, all Americans, have a shot at the American dream. And to have a good paying job. A good paying manufacturing job. Look, my father was a worker. My father was a union man. Much of his life he spent on the factory floor. Those people have been abandoned. They're the forgotten Americans. Under Trump, they're forgotten no more. 820 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, liberalism's worst nightmare, baby. Okay, speaking of Canada, listen now to President Trump saying, look, our dairy farmers have been getting hammered for 25 years because, and you got to hear the numbers because you're not going to believe me, milk, cheese, you name it, 270%, 251%, the tariffs that the Canadians have been putting on all kinds of goods, including, by the way, lumber, aluminum, copper, potash, you name it. We're not talking 10%, 20%, 25%. We're talking 50%, 70%, 90%. As I said, in some cases, when it comes to dairy, 250, 270%. Roll cut 6, a mic.
We're also standing up for our great farmers and ranchers who are brutalized by nations all over the world. Brutalized. Canada, by the way, imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on many of our dairy products. They do the first can of milk. They do the first little carton of milk at a very low price, but after that it gets bad, and then it gets up to 275, 300%. So when they're figuring what's Canada charging, they say, about 2%, 3%. But take a look at what happens down the road. When you look a little bit, it's not a pretty picture, and we don't like it, and it's not fair. It's not fair to our farmers. It's not fair to our country.
He's completely right. By the way, he's being a little sarcastic. The first 100,000, okay? The first 100,000, they tariff at a normal rate. But anything beyond 100,000, whether it's a cheese or, cartons of milk or whatever it is, boom, 271%, my friend. 271%. And yet the Canadians are crying. You got to see them. I've never seen anything for months now. This is an economic war. This is sabotage. It's Pearl Harbor. How dare he impose a 25% tariff on us? How dare? I thought we were friends. Really? So you can hammer us with a 271% tariff. No problemo. And you call that friendship? And when we say, no, it's going to be a little more fair now. No, it's going to be 25% on cars, on steel, on aluminum. And, yeah, it's going to be a little higher now on your milk and your dairy and your cheese and your lumber. Again, much lower than what they're charging us. So we're still tariffing them at about half of what they're tariffing us. Listen now to Trump saying we're paying for Canada's national security, for their military protection. Frankly, essentially the same thing with Mexico. And they've been taking us to the cleaners. And we are talking about some of the biggest trade deficits in the world. Well, the days of ripping us off, of abusing a United States are over. I'm tariffing Canada. I'm tariffing Mexico. And if they don't like it, too bad. Friendship is a two-way street. Roll cut 7. Mike.
With countries like Canada, you know, we subsidize a lot of countries and keep them going and keep them in business. In the case of Mexico, it's $300 billion a year. In the case of Canada, it's close to $200 billion a year. And I say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? I mean, at what point do we say, you got to work for yourselves and you got to, this is why we have the big deficits. This is why we have that amount of debt that's been placed on our heads over the last number of years. And we're really not taking it anymore.
There, that's the magic word or the magic phrase. We're not taking it anymore. No, we're just not going to take it anymore. So we've got a $300 billion trade deficit with Mexico, $250 billion trade deficit with Canada, and this is every year. It's not one time, it's every year. That's over $500 billion. Now, you know what that means? That means less jobs in America, less products being made in America, less factories, plants, production in America. That means no taxes. If you're not making money, if you don't have a job, if you're not generating revenue and profits, you can't pay taxes. So it's not just that it's a massive trade deficit. It's impoverishing us and also leading to massive government deficits because we just can never generate enough wealth and taxes because we're constantly sourcing our wealth and our jobs to other countries. Let me just play one more. Listen to Australia, our Aussie. You call this friendship? Listen to this. Roll cut 8. Mike. Sorry, Dan.
Australia bans, and they're wonderful people and wonderful everything, but they ban American beef, yet we imported $3 billion of Australian beef from them just last year alone. They won't take any of our beef. They don't want it because they don't want it to affect their farmers. And you know what? I don't blame them, but we're doing the same thing right now, starting about midnight tonight, I would say.
Good. Yes. But again, nothing. He's right. Look, nothing against the Aussies. Really, I love the Aussies. Hell, I was born and raised in Canada. Of course I love Canada and the Canadians. But I'm sorry, right is right and wrong is wrong. So you can sell your beef to us, but we can't sell our beef to you in Australia? That's not friendship. That's screwing us. 8:31 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, a couple lines are open if you want to jump on. I want to ask all of you. Trump yesterday himself acknowledged this is a massive watershed now in his second term. This tariff policy that he has now outlined will be a defining characteristic of how he will be remembered by history. He says it is the key to restoring our wealth as a country. real broad-based economic prosperity, bringing back our manufacturing, our jobs, industry, our industrial base, and standing up finally for American workers. Do you agree with Trump's decision now to levy tariffs across the board? Or do you agree primarily with the Democrats? You have some Republicans who clearly are not happy. The media is going after Trump hard, predicting this is going to lead to high inflation. It is going to drive down growth and in particular spark a huge, massive recession. Listen now to Marcula. Ice Cream Ed Markey. Ice Cream Ed, I want to suck your money. I want to take your blood. Listen now to the ice cream man. Marcula Ed Markey saying this isn't Liberation Day yesterday. It's Obliteration Day. Roll cut 22, Dan.
Do you know what tariffs the president's going to announce tomorrow? And do you think the president knows what new tariffs he's going to announce tomorrow?
I think the president is making it up as he's going along. I don't think he knows, but when he calls it Liberation Day, it could be Obliteration Day if he doesn't act in a way that invokes the law of unintended consequences. So just for New England, just for Massachusetts, it would be $1 billion in higher oil prices for the state of Massachusetts. That's what our governor said yesterday. So if he wants to target protecting the auto industry, he should say that. But to have an all-out war with Canada, with every country in the world who was a major trading partner, that could have catastrophic economic consequences for our country.
This guy's an absolute moron. I mean, what a loser. What a moron. Seriously. So, no, now you care about the price of gas and oil. Huh? Hey, Marcula. Now you and Maura Healey. Now you and AO and your buddies, AOC and Bernie and, let's get rid of all fossil fuels. The Green New Deal. Make gas $5, $6, $7 a gallon. And now you who brought us the historic inflation under Biden. Now suddenly, this could cost $1 billion. By the way, gas and oil prices are going down. Inflation going down. Hiring going up. So far, all of their predictions of doom and gloom are over. They're not panning out. But again, keep the fear, keep the hysteria. And here's my theory. I think they want to talk the markets into tanking. I think they want to create such a sense of fear and panic out there that people stop spending money, that people stop borrowing money, say, to buy a house or buy a car or whatever it is. They want to talk the economy into a recession. And then say, aha, you see, it's Trump's fault. And it's not going to work. I'm telling you, it's not going to work. And they're going to be proven wrong again for the millionth time. Agree, disagree, 617-266-6868. Bruce in Florida. Thanks for holding, Bruce, and welcome.
Thank you for taking my call, Jeff.
My pleasure.
I wanted to comment on two of your previous callers, good ones. One that the auto expert. What I say is that there is something I would call underutilized human capital on a grand scale in this country, referring to millions of young men who are highly computer literate and who are underemployed in the service sector, who I will bet you would be delighted to be trained, and they can be trained, to do the high-tech manufacturing jobs.
Brilliant. I'm telling you, brilliant. Please, Bruce, I don't want to cut you off. Keep rolling, my friend.
The good guy that called from Walmart, I want to remind everybody, when you go shopping for so-called quote unquote cheap stuff in Walmart, out of your left-hand pocket, yes, you're paying for cheap consumer goods. From your right-hand pocket, you're paying the taxes that you have to pay, income taxes, for EBT cards and Medicaid and other government services that the federal government provides through your income taxes, because Walmart doesn't pay them a living wage. That's the other part of that deal. So we're paying a hell of a lot for cheap consumer goods. The other point I'd like everybody to reflect on is, in the 1960s, about 1 in 5 jobs in this country were manufacturing jobs related to the auto industry, the autos themselves, tires, etc. And those jobs paid high wages, union-level wages. They had defined benefits, not defined contributions, pension plans, and health insurance. Today, the largest employer in this country, and here I go again, is Walmart. So remember the BS we were told, oh, we don't have to worry about manufacturing. We're going to have a service economy. I know I have to watch my language. I'll tell you what my response, I won't tell you what my response to that is. How has the service economy worked? How it's worked is a declining purchasing power, declining real wages for the vast majority of people who work for a living. That's all I have to say, Jeff. And thank you for taking my call.
Oh, man, what a good call. Bruce, honestly, again, best audience in the business. Bruce, please don't be a stranger. Call again, because IQ level through the roof. I'm telling you, right through the roof. You're completely right. Look, I saw it in my lifetime. Now, my dad never worked for a car company. My uncle did. Okay, my uncle worked for he worked for GM up in just north of Montreal. They had a big plant. They made, was it Firebirds? Anyway, one of these like sports cars, middle end sports cars. Anyway, so my uncle worked for General Motors. And so I learned a lot from cars from him, and we would talk about it at the dinner table. But my father was exactly that. Now, he eventually moved to middle management because he was such a rabble-rouser as a union leader that management said, in fact, the owner of the company said, Jack, I want you to fight for me with the clients the way you fight against me for the workers. So he made my dad an offer he couldn't refuse, and my dad basically went from the factory floor into middle management, okay? But that was like maybe 15, 20 years after he, came to Canada and started to work. But let that go. The point is, he worked on a factory floor, good wages, union level wages with defined benefits, good health care plan. And he was a proud working man who was able to take care of his wife and his 2 kids. And, my dad would complain throughout his whole life. He goes, we don't make anything anymore. It wasn't just in the United States. It was in Canada. And he said, it's all these service sector jobs. Everybody's flipping hamburgers. Everybody's working at some kind of a takeout job or a secretarial job. Not there's anything wrong with being a secretary, but it tends to be lower wage. My dad would be like, you can't feed a family on that salary. And so he just said, our standard of living keeps going down and down. We've been impoverishing the middle and the working class for God knows how many years. And we're destroying the American dream. We've hollowed it all out. When we hollowed out manufacturing, we hollowed out the working middle class. And you're right. More people are working. They're called the working poor. That's what a Walmart job is. So you don't make enough to feed your family, not even close. So we got to give them child tax credits. We got to put them on Medicaid. We got to help them out with EBT. So all of these social programs that we're paying for in much higher taxes. So yeah, you're getting a cheap, flat screen television. Okay. You're getting a cheap toy. Okay. But I'm telling you, it's not worth it. Because what we've done is we've impoverished our country, we've lowered our standard of living, and what we've ultimately done is we are destroying the middle working class. And that's the exact opposite of what America was founded on and what made America great. Agree, disagree, 617-266-6868 is the number. Trump says it's Liberation Day. The Democrats and the media say it's Obliteration Day. Which side are you on? Do you like Trump's tariffs or don't like Trump? 8:49, actually 8:50 now on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's bulldozer. Now not just cleaning up the liberal bull, cleaning up the globalist bull. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, let me just say this. I got to say it. You can text us 70470. This is a text from 617. And let me just say this, 617, okay, before I read the actual text. I love you in a non-sexual way, my friend. You want to talk about an absolute killer text. Please, you got to listen to this. Jeff, is it too much to ask that our cholesterol-lowering medication or a medication for high blood pressure or our antibiotics be manufactured here in America? After all, Massachusetts always boasts that we are the head of the pharmaceutical industry. Just look at Cambridge. Look at the brightest minds here in Massachusetts, biotech, life sciences. We don't need our prescription medications made in China or India or Ireland or wherever else in the world. And Jeff, as far as made in America, I'm all for it. Now, he goes through a list. In all honesty, please, I want you to listen to this. You know, I don't know if I'm being too sentimental here or this is my patriotism talking, but I'm looking at this, I'm like, he's completely right. Like, seriously, what's happened to American pride? Our self-respect, our dignity. Here, just listen to this. Because he's completely right. 617 is completely right. Jeff, as far as made in America, I'm all for it. Some of the best red wine in the world comes from Washington State and California. Some of the best sharp cheddar cheese, Wisconsin, Vermont, New York. All the crops that you want can be grown right here. Arkansas leads the United States in rice production, for example, and chicken production. We have the best cattle ranchers. Let's bring back big stores like Sears and Craftsman Tools made in America, right next to your Ford, GMC, or Chevrolet. We don't need the rest of the world. The rest of the world needs America. And then 617 on a roll just keeps on going. And Jeff, Pennsylvania, they give us steel. Hershey chocolate from Hershey, Pennsylvania should be what we are buying as Americans. And the last point, interstate commerce is the answer. Let Massachusetts work with Texas, Louisiana, etc. We have domestic oil and gas, plentiful. More than enough for ourselves and enough to export to the entire world. We also have the best shrimp in the Gulf of America. And New Bedford here in Mass, which is true, boasts the best scallops. Let's have them here in America rather than export all of our goods to China and France. Why on earth, when we can go to the supermarket, do we have farm-raised shrimp from Vietnam or Thailand? You know, it wasn't always like this. And I'm not talking about all the good old days, the 1970s, the 1980s, when the Kuhner man was growing up. No, I mean from 1789. All throughout the 19th century, the whole 19th century, most of the 20th century, we had a high tariff. We made in America. We built in America. We bought products and goods in America, made in America, with American workers and American sweat and American toil and American labor at high wages, good wages that were the envy of the world. That's why so many people came. Wave after wave after wave of immigrants. And I'm sorry, but I have to say this, and it's painful to say it, and you know how much I love this country, okay? But I'm sorry. The truth is the truth is the truth. What's happened to us? Oh, really, what's happened to us? Our pride, our patriotism, our self-respect as a people and as a nation. We were proud to make American goods. We were proud to buy American. Really, I'm telling you, look, my dad, who just passed away, as you know, a couple months ago, I'm not a drinker. He loved to drink. He was from the old country, from Eastern Europe, okay, what is today Croatia. I mean, they're all boozers down there, okay? I mean, not all, but many of them. They like to drink. They have a high tolerance for alcohol. They like to drink, and they can really handle their alcohol, okay? My dad told me this for 40 years. He goes, I don't understand the Americans. It goes because he used to travel for his company a lot, so he would go to the United States a lot. And he goes, they always want to buy French wine or Italian wine or Chilean wine or Australian wine. He goes, I talk to the guys at work, and they go, oh, yeah, Jack, we're going to go for a drink. You want to come? And he goes, I don't understand you guys. He goes, I'm telling you, I'm not saying this to humor you. The wine from California is better than anything you can get anywhere in the world. So why are we buying from Vietnam or Thailand? Again, no disrespect to the Vietnamese or the Thai. We got to bring it halfway around the world? Here? What's the matter? We can't buy local? From our own fishermen? Support our own Americans? Our own fellow fishermen in our own state? And again, for what? For what? A plastic toy at Walmart? Oh, really? What are we selling our souls for? What? A $200 flat screen television that breaks after 2 years? That piece of junk that they make in China? Here, I bought a lamp. I didn't see where it was made. It was made in China. $15, whatever I paid for it. 6 months, the damn thing doesn't work. So we're going to sell our souls for what? Sell out our country for what? This is Trump's response. Okay? This is Trump's response. And then I promise I'm going to go right back to the phone lines. From this day forward, we're going to buy American. We're going to make American. We're going to be proud of made in the USA. And we're going to stand up for American workers and American jobs and good American wages. Again, the working class will be liberated again. And the middle class. Main Street, not Wall Street. So here it is. A 10% baseline tariff. This is what they're all freaking out over. A 10% baseline tariff. It's going to be across the board. Okay. And that, by the way, is effective April 5th. So whatever, 2 days from today. Okay. So effective April 5th, 10% across the board. Now, other nations were going to be hit with what Trump calls, quote, a discounted reciprocal tariff. So it's not even reciprocal. We're actually going to be charging other countries less than what they're charging us. But we're going to start charging them. The higher rates are for nations that the White House says are bad actors on trade. For example, the Japanese and the EU are really some of the worst. Our so-called friends. Well, there's going to be a 24% tariff on Japanese goods. By the way, they're tariffing us at 50%. 50. So 24 is still less than half of 50. The EU, 39% they're tariffing us. 39. Our tariff on EU goods, 20% tariff. Again, just about half. China, 69% tariff. Okay, they rape us. China now is going to have a new 34% tariff. 34. It's less than it's half of their 69%. Just under half. Or sorry, just over half. Forgive me. Canada and Mexico, 25%. 25%. Mexico and Canada on many goods, 100, 200, 300%. And to protect the auto industry in particular, and steel, and copper, and aluminum, which we need for our national security, tariffs will take effect, imposing 25% on all foreign-made autos and steel as of midnight last night. That's it. That's it. Now, this is not an economic war. This is not a trade war. This is not a declaration of a trade war against the world. This is us simply putting America and Americans first. We have been getting screwed for too long. They've been playing us for fools and suckers. And all Trump is saying is, those days are over. It's not going to be free trade anymore. It's going to be fair trade. Fair is fair is fair. And if you're against fair trade, you're against America. Agree, disagree, 617-266-6868. I want to go to the phone lines, listen to Trump. He's literally making the exact same point I'm making. Roll cut 10. Mike. Sorry, Dan.
We truly can be very wealthy. We can be so much wealthier than any country. It's not even believable, but we're getting smart. Nearly a century later, in the face of unrelenting economic warfare, the United States can no longer continue with a policy of unilateral economic surrender. We cannot pay the deficits of Canada, Mexico, and so many other countries. We used to do it. We can't do it anymore. We take care of countries all over the world. We pay for their military. We pay for everything they have to pay. And then when you want to cut back a little bit, they get upset that you're not taking care of them any longer. But we have to take care of our people, and we're going to take care of our people first. And I'm sorry to say that.
Don't say sorry. Everything else was perfect. I swear, perfect. What are you apologizing for? There's nothing to say sorry for. We protect you. We subsidize you. You've been ripping us off. You've been freeloading off of our backs. It's time now to stand on your own 2 feet. Okay? Put on your big boy pants. Remember, when it comes to competition, and we are in competition with every country in the world, if they could take all our jobs, they would. It's not personal. It's business. If they could take all of our manufacturing, all of our industry, all of our jobs, they would. Of course they would. You'd be stupid not to. There are no friends. There are no allies. There are just competitors. Agree, disagree. George in New Hampshire. Thanks for holding, George, and welcome.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for taking the call.
My pleasure, George.
So I think the break for everything is that everybody's focused on the stock market, which they've been for the last 20, 30 years, at least 20 years. At least I took notice with my business. I run into a lot of people that, are day traders, that type of thing. And I think that's really what's been happening. So a symbolism story that I could share is that I went to a town in Massachusetts for a class. And, the downtown looks like it's been, it's dilapidated. It needs a lot of work. Center of a town has a marijuana shop that probably was a shopping, like a food store at one point. And that's what's happening. It's the divorce between Main Street and in the stock market. And I think that's, if we just looked at, if we focused more on our communities and, how we live, I mean, across the board, I think, most people would agree that, what's been going on, since at least China's been in the WTO. I mean, it's a joke. I mean, I've been a business owner. I'm one of those oddball guys that, started the business very young, and thank God I'm still in business. I've worked like all business owners, worked extremely hard for what I've earned. I'm finally, I would say, at a middle class wage. And there's a lot of factors. My skill set's improved. Just, more of a veteran. But anyways, and, when I first started the business, I was in the South with the business. And, my first obstacle was illegal immigrants coming into the country. And, it was foreign for me. I'm from this area. And, being down there, I was like, this is like the Wild West, cutting wages. I was barely making enough money. So I had to deal with that. In the mid 90s, you know what I mean? So it was what it was. I eventually moved back north, and then the fentanyl thing, and the pills, the prescription, so I couldn't put a crew together anymore because basically people that used to drink alcohol or whatever, smoke a little pot or whatever, now became basically real addicts, that moved into pills and moved on to heroin. So that workforce is gone. Basically what I'm trying to say is, I chose this path and I'm happy I did so. I feel like I'm a better person because of it. But, it's like, it's basically goes back to the Main Street point that I was trying to make from the get-go. In my area, Harbor Freight just moved in. So basically a Dollar General, which are fine stores to shop at if you have to, because you can afford it, but that's not real. That's just those are just low end overseas companies basically monopolizing just cheap goods, and the goods aren't. They're okay, but they're not American. You know what I mean? And
look, George, I'm not trying to stroke your ego. Okay, I'm speaking from the heart, like I'm in the confessional. When you describe who you are, what you are, your character, your love for America, your love for your fellow citizens, your love of your business, your love of your workers who you work for, and you want them to get a good wage, and you don't want them to be hooked on fentanyl or heroin. You don't want them to fall into this economic despair. You're talking about economic self-reliance and economic independence. And that's what this country literally was founded on. That's exactly what our founding fathers intended for America. That you would have business owners or farmers or whatever who would be economically independent and self-sufficient and would run their lives and run their families and run their businesses or their farms or whatever the way a Republican government should, which is through individualism, self-help, self-reliance, and love of the United States. And you've been facing a tidal wave against you, all these forces working against you for the last 30 years. And you're right. Everything is about Wall Street now. Notice the only argument they have against Trump is, the markets aren't reacting well. The markets aren't reacting well. Oh my, and they keep hyping it up over and over and over. Well, I've been saying this for 30 years. I never care what Wall Street says. I really don't. I know people have their 401ks. I know they have their stock market portfolios, their retirement. I understand. It's important. But to me, it's always been Main Street over Wall Street. Remember, Wall Street is full of Fortune 500 companies. Wall Street is full of these very wealthy investors, hedge fund people, multinationals, the corporate economic elite, the 1%, who are the ones that have sold us down the river. They're the ones who've given us this problem. So, of course, they're going to lose money over this. Of course, they're not happy about this. But I don't care about the 1%. I care about the 99%. And what Trump is doing, and this is the only other president I've seen this in my lifetime is Reagan. He's putting Main Street over Wall Street. And he's saying that this unilateral economic surrender, really this economic betrayal, I call it the great betrayal of our elites. Over the last 40 years, Bush 41, Bill Clinton, Bush 43, the dear leader, and of course, Dementia Joe. It's now over. Trump is finally putting Main Street over Wall Street. And that's why the elites are losing their minds. Because they're losing their power, they're losing their wealth, and they're losing their control. And to me, that tells you everything you need to know. 9:20 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, I want to go right back to Christopher in Quincy. Christopher, before the break, you said you're 29 years old. You're a blue-collar worker. You work over 50 hours a week. And because of Dementia Joe and his destructive policies, the American dream is dead for you. And then we got cut off by the break. Please pick up where you left off, Christopher. Why is the American dream dead for you? If you could just elaborate a little bit.
Everything is just so expensive between gas, groceries, rent. I mean, studio apartments are going for $2,000, no utilities included. In this country, you have to be an illegal immigrant to get everything handed to you for you to survive. I mean, the best 4 years I've ever had working was when Trump was in office. And then once Joe Biden got in, I could see it in my paycheck. I'm working all these hours and getting nothing for it. You know, we have to go back to America first, American made. You know, this man is putting his life on the line for the American people, and these corrupt Democrats who are too concerned with filling and stuffing their pockets and putting illegal immigrants first, they've destroyed that. And this man is trying to bring that back into this country, and they won't stop. It's just ridiculous. I'm all for the tariffs. I'm all for the mass deportation of illegal immigrants, and I voted for Trump mostly for this no tax on overtime because that's how I survive. And it's just, if this doesn't happen now, this America is going to become a third world country. So we have to start fighting back, because if we don't, it's over for us.
Christopher, you kind of answered my question, but let me just rephrase it then. What do you make of the argument that these tariffs, at least in the short term, are going to make a lot of goods and products more expensive? So someone like you, as you're saying, you're living check to check, your check is getting smaller, they're taxing the hell out of you when you work overtime, you can barely afford your groceries, your rent, your utilities. You're saying even though there's going to be maybe a short-term hit, you're willing to take that short-term hit because you think in the long term it's going to benefit you and other blue-collar workers like you, correct?
Oh, definitely. I would rather take this short-term hit for the long run, because it's going to pay off for all of us hardworking Americans in the long run.
Christopher, thank you very much for that call. Really articulate, really good call. Caroline in New Hampshire. Thanks for holding, Caroline, and welcome.
Hi, thank you for taking my call, Jeff.
My pleasure.
I just want to say that you are right. I did come in late on your show, so I don't know if anybody else had said that, but New England used to be the textile manufacturing capital. We made shoes in Salem. When I was a little girl, we used to go and buy shoes in Salem when factories were still there, believe it or not. And sweaters in, I think it was Concord or Salem, New Hampshire. They had cotton manufacturing. That's why I relied on the South. You know, we would get the cotton from the South, but we would manufacture it and make our textiles up here in the North. And we need that back. But also, I lived in Michigan, and I saw I was there 2007 to 2009, I saw them shut down those automobile factories. And who brought them over to China but Bain Capital, owned by no other than Romney. I mean, he's responsible for investing in China. And now we need companies to invest here. My fear is that now China, their wages have gone up, and now they're going to come back here. And I'd like to see American companies, and I have to say Japan has invested $1 trillion in the United States, and they are our friend. We've worked well together. But China, they want it all. And what we're buying now, yeah, things are cheap, but it's cheap crap. And if we go back to the original American-made, that was well-made stuff. But the problem is, China owns the shipping ports, which in the future, if we want to compete, we've got to get that back. They just blocked a sale with Panama Canal with BlackRock, which I'm not a big fan of BlackRock, but if we can get that back in the United States' hands, that's key. That's really important. But also, in order to do this, we also need incentives for small businesses to start up, because that's going to help. I mean, small business is the backbone of an economy, but we need incentives. We need ways for people to start up these companies, to make these products here, and not to have other countries come in and set up factories, and because it's cost effective to build here rather than in China, for example. But we want to, American people or our citizens to have that opportunity to do that here. So I think that the American dream is far from dead. I think it's absolutely, millionaires are made every day. And why can't we start in?
Oh, I agree. Caroline, look, again, dynamite. Really, absolutely outstanding call. It's not just, you can be a millionaire. There's no question about it. What they're talking about, the American dream is, and that's what Christopher's relating to, is that you can have a good middle-class life for you and your family. And that's what Trump is trying to revive and restore. 9:31 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, couple lines are open if you want to jump on. Kuhner country, trust me when I tell you this. One of the most underreported stories in the country now, and it's deliberate, because the fake news media is out to bring down Trump, so all they want to do now is create panic, fear, and frankly, hatred for Trump, for Elon, for the entire administration. But one thing that's been happening over the last couple of months is Trump is inking deal after deal after deal with companies all over the world who are agreeing, as Caroline mentioned, it was a dynamite call where she said, big Japanese companies, $1 trillion deals, $500 billion deals. And it's not just Japanese, it's European companies, it's Canadian companies, it's companies in Asia, in which they've agreed to come to the United States, build a plant, build a factory, create tens and tens and tens of thousands of good-paying American jobs. We're looking at trillions of dollars now in investment over the next couple of years. And in particular, auto car companies, foreign auto companies, Mazda, Nissan, Audi, BMW, Volkswagen, by the way, a Canadian, a company up in Canada, they're saying, look, we just want to get around the tariff. I mean, that's, we've been taking advantage of the United States for 20, 30 years on this. No, we don't want to eat a tariff. We don't want to absorb a tariff. No, what we're going to do is, to get around the tariffs, we're going to come to America and we're going to build our plants there and hire Americans at a good wage. So listen now to Trump. And he's telling everyone, the country, but especially, us, his supporters, MAGA, these are the people that told us NAFTA was going to be incredible. These are the people who told us that free trade, most favored nation status with China, it was going to lead to world peace and prosperity. that this would make China a democracy and create this vibrant, rising middle class and end communist rule. And that over and over again, these people have lied, not just about these trade deals. They lied about me. They lied about Russia collusion. They lied about the Hunter Biden laptop. They lied about absolutely everything. So don't believe them now. Roll cut 14, Mike.
Companies are pouring into our country at levels never seen before with jobs and money to follow, and it's really beautiful. In the coming days, there will be complaints from the globalists and the outsourcers and special interests and the fake news. Fake news will always complain. But never forget, every prediction our opponents made about trade for the last 30 years has been proven totally wrong. They were wrong about NAFTA. They were wrong about China. They were wrong about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have been a disaster if I didn't terminate it. If I didn't terminate that, United Auto Workers, you would have had no jobs in this country. You would have had no jobs. It was all going to other countries.
He's completely right. Had we passed the TPP, which is what Obama wanted, what Hillary wanted, what Biden wanted, what the free traders at the Wall Street Journal, those idiots, what the Mitt Romneys and the Chris Christies and what the rhinos wanted, there would not be a single auto worker, United Auto Worker left in America. That's it. It would have been the end of the American auto industry. Gone. Completely gone. Gone. I want to play one more. Okay? One more cut. And this is maybe the mother of all cuts, because it's an irrefutable fact. It's in every textbook. It's in every American history book. And it's something that our elites want us all to forget. And Trump said, I'm going to say it again because it's the truth. America was built on tariffs. High tariffs and America and American economic power, American economic expansion, America's great manufacturing and industry, what made us the world's greatest economic superpower, was all built on a tariff. Listen now to Trump saying a tariff, an American tariff, is as American as apple pie. It goes all the way back to George Washington and our founders themselves. Roll cut 9, Dan.
1789 to 1913, we were a tariff-backed nation, and the United States was proportionately the wealthiest it has ever been. So wealthy, in fact, that in the 1880s, they established a commission to decide what they were going to do with the vast sums of money they were collecting. We were collecting so much money so fast, we didn't know what to do with it. Isn't that a nice problem to have? What do you think, Marco? Good problem? Marco would love that problem. But we don't have that problem anymore, but we're not going to have it very much longer, I will tell you.
But everything you said is true. There was so much money coming in from these customs duties, from the tariffs, that in the 1880s, they're like, well, we're running surplus after surplus after surplus. Like, what do we do with all this money? Like, what do we do with it? No income tax. There was no income tax, no sales tax, there was no tax. The only tax was a tariff. And we boomed. We were literally the envy of the world. So when they try to tell us, like now, oh my God, tariffs will be the end. Oh my God, we'll go broke, we'll go bankrupt. Oh my God, it'll trigger a depression. They're lying. Tariffs made America, and they made America great, and they'll make America great again. Agree, disagree. Rich in New Hampshire. Thanks for holding, Rich, and welcome.
Hi, good morning.
Hi,
Mr.
Rich.
Kuhner.
Hi.
I'm a factory owner, for a number of years a 63-year-old glove manufacturer who was funded by the DPA in the first Trump administration during COVID. That's the start. I'm under great pressure right now because nobody bought American. We also were funded by the same DPA under the Biden administration. No gloves were purchased. The big order, which was $500 million and plus, went to a Canadian company for Asian gloves for 2 years' supply. No glove factories were given orders during the last COVID and post-COVID. I will tell you a little more. During post-COVID, there was a crash in the glove market.
Rich, sorry. If I just for the audience, when you say gloves, do you mean plastic gloves, or do you mean like winter gloves, like actual gloves, like to shovel the snow or walk in the cold? Are you talking about
100% tariff?
Hold on, Rich. Rich, are we talking plastic gloves or leather gloves?
2025 and 26, respectively. What does that tell you? It tells
Rich, can you hear me?
User. It tells you that it is.
Okay, let's try to reconnect with Rich because there's something going on. For some reason, he can't hear us. Anyway, Rich, if you can, please call again because I'm trying to ask you a few basic questions, and for some reason, you're not hearing me. It was latex gloves. Okay. Ken in Topsfield. Thanks for holding, Ken, and welcome.
Yeah, good morning, Jeff.
Hi, Ken.
You want to hear about the auto industry. In 2008, I went out to a General Motors plant in Linden, New Jersey, just south of Newark, and we spent 10 and a half months demolishing the building. And I was in charge of the scrapyard, sorting what was there. That plant was making Cadillacs in World War II, and within 3 weeks, they retooled and they started making the small little airplanes that were on the aircraft carriers, and good to the war effort. Once that plant folded in early 2000, you could blow blocks and blocks and blocks of nobody living there. Houses for sale, just destroyed, sort of like in Detroit, Michigan. I was out there doing a job. When people don't realize, when these factories close, all the employees lived around the factory. Now they have no jobs. They don't want to live there anymore. They leave, and the whole neighborhood turns to blight. That's all I got to say.
Okay, no, I know. Look, it's been 30 years it's been going on, and these so-called free trade policies have led to an economic wasteland in many parts of the United States. And you're right, shuttered factories, blight, urban blight, smokes, losing their livelihoods, losing everything. And that's why we've got to bring manufacturing, industry, and our jobs back. Ken, thank you for that call. Okay, we got Rich back on. We're going to go to him right after this short break. 9:49 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's Bulldozer. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, we got Rich back. Rich, my apologies. For whatever reason, you couldn't hear me. So you're a factory owner. You make gloves. Rich, just for the audience, I assume, just to clarify, you make plastic or latex gloves, correct?
Yes, nitrile latex, correct.
Okay,
among
please,
other things.
If you don't mind, start from the beginning. Go, Rich.
Yes, sir. Again, we were funded by DPA funding during COVID. We grew up to 185 workers, and post-COVID, I had to lay off 167 because the government never bought the gloves. We need long-term purchase orders from the U.S. government. I've got 20 million gloves in stock right now, and it's a sales problem. It's a competitive problem. The products from Asia are coming in at about 1/3 of our cost in America to make the same product. Okay? And then, so I believe in long-term purchase orders for the factory owners direct, and pay good prices, pay the prices they would pay an importer, because the importers are making a killing, and the the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, all mandate competitive bidding and all this stuff. These entities, like the U.S. Postal, should be mandated to place orders with the factories, and then we can rebuild an industry. It is big. It's a massive industry. Anything questions?
Well, Rich, if you don't mind me asking, why are these gloves, say, made in China, as an example, Asia, as you mentioned, why are they 1/3 the price to make, say, someone like you in New Hampshire?
For dumping. They were selling below the cost of the raw material, which is about 55% of the cost of the product. And the Malaysians took the first beating, but the Malaysian tariff just went up to 24%. So this will be good for American industry. But the industries are already being shuttered. I'm being forced to liquidate all the equipment that was purchased with U.S. money. And I'm disgusted and tired of it because who comes to your aid? The Chinese. I'm having a Chinese visitor tomorrow. I value him. I appreciate his products. They're very high-end gloves. They're extraordinary, best quality in the world, and he wants to do next-gen JV with me in America. I love it, okay? So, again, it is a global world. The world is flat, as you'll see in the book by Friedman years ago. But we got to protect the American industry with long-term purchase orders from the entities that use these gloves or other products. Thank you.
Rich, thank you. Really good call. 617-266-6868. They're dumping. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this from owners, and it doesn't matter what the industry is. They go, Jeff, because they're subsidized in China. The Chinese government subsidizes their businesses, their industries. So they go, because look, we're selling this below price. So we're losing money. Don't worry. We'll pay you and you'll make money. State subsidies. So you'll have a massive unfair advantage. So you can charge your product, say gloves, I'm just going to make up a figure, 30 cents. Well, here in America, we can only make it for $1. Why can they sell it for 30 cents? Because they're dumping it. They're selling it for below market value. So, we're not going to make it for 30 cents because we'll go out of business. The Chinese would go out of business. But the government, you see, in China, they don't have, yes, it's communism, but it's also state capitalism. It's both. So Beijing says, well, okay, you sell it for 30 cents. We'll wipe out the Americans, the American glove owners or glove makers. And, whatever. Well, we need to make 60 cents to make a profit. Fine. We'll give you the 30 cents, extra 30 cents. So they keep dumping. And that's how they've been destroying us. But what does a tariff do? It raises the prices. So now China's going to have a much harder time dumping. 617-266-6868. John in New Hampshire. John, I hate to do this to you. We've got 1 minute. The floor is yours. Go. Hello, we lost John? Okay, who do you want me to go to next? Steve in New Hampshire. 1 minute. The floor is yours, Steve. Go.
Yeah, Jeff, the concern I have with the tariffs is this. I'm a manufacturer's representative. I represented 5 companies. Out of the 5, 2 of the American companies have decided to close their doors and close shop this year. The problem is that when you show the American products in comparison to other imported goods, there is a big discrepancy in the pricing. A lot of it is due to the labor and also to regulations that the American companies have to adhere to in order to create the product here in the U.S. So my concern is that even though the tariffs go on the product from import, they will still not be as expensive as the products that are produced here in the U.S.
So, Steve, what you're saying is our products are still too expensive. What if we, I'm out of time. I think Trump, part of that is he's going to lower taxes. He's going to let factories be able to deduct, say, investment and research and development, and he wants to slash all these regulations. So it becomes much cheaper to do business in America and to make a product in America. So my understanding is Trump is doing this all together as a strategy. Bye-bye.